get a name for themselves art wise, and you have to do it that way. And then, like, I struggle because I just don't want to have to, like, it is true. You have to kind of really stay in a very, people want to see you in a very specific box, you know, they want to understand your art in a particular way. And that's true whether you're in the street or just anywhere in a gallery, really. And I've always struggled with that because from an artistic perspective, I have so many different things I'm interested in. And, you know, I feel like my stuff kind of is in constant motion. And so I don't like the idea of having to, you know, force myself into, like, I tend to work more realistically, but then I also work illustratively sometimes. And then um, I don't want to not be able to work abstractly, and I do, and I you know, but that defies the conventional wisdom, which says that you really have to have a very specific style that you pretty much always follow. And I think that's doubly true on the street, where it's really essentially pop art, where you're trying to market yourself almost in a way that you would market a product, you know, and it's really just putting up billboards. That's always something I struggle with because I want to obviously develop more of people that are interested, that follow it, but I don't want to get pigeonholed like that.
What do you think, too, has been the effect of, say, things like social media and going from, you know, creating, you talk about, you know, the 90s to say now, has that been a benefit for you personally, seeing that, okay, I can go and share my work with anybody around the world, but there's also millions of other people. So yes, you get that inspiration, but you get millions of people that are kind of almost flooding the scene. And then even, you know, I noticed, at least with myself, when I've got a piece and I have to put all the different hashtags, and it just feels like almost filtering it down too much to where you can't just put something out and let it be and let people discover it. It's almost, you have to be very, very hyper kind of focused with putting it out there.
Yeah. I mean, it's so different between like when I graduated from school and now, and it's good and it's bad. I mean, I wouldn't be able to. I mean, social media is everything in terms of me selling my work. To be honest with you, so that's huge. I mean, prior to really that, I was doing all corporate work. I was doing all illustration and stuff like that. That was like, you know, I couldn't just do fine art and sell it. I mean, I would show in galleries and I would sell some stuff, but it was not enough to pay the bills, and I would end up doing just a ton of like logos or corporate illustrations or whatever. But then that was just, you know, you were doing stuff, whatever they wanted is what you would do. There was no artistic freedom at all. And social media changed that entirely. And now I have the whole world as a market for me. And I get also all sorts of, you know, like other interesting things come out of it, such as, I mean, even like this podcast, for instance, or, you know, being involved in TV shows that I've done or other things like that, all through not just social media, but the internet in general. But as you mentioned, the downside is if you have access to 30 million people, or I don't know, whatever number, you probably also are competing with that many people, either directly like your art, but also for me, the biggest thing is like, okay, so in 1998, let's say, I was like, you know, just basically, no, I'm dating myself, but just out of school. And I, you know, was hustling and I was selling art on the, you know, like setting up in Soho, selling art. And I was, you know, showing at these little pop-up galleries, and I was doing corporate work and all this. And I was struggling, and I was like living in some crappy place in Williamsburg. And then, you know, now I sell a lot more, and I live in Manhattan, and everything is much nicer. But um, I feel more anxiety about the quality of my work now than I did then. Then I was very, very sure. Like, no, I know that I am talented. I know that not only am I talented, but that people are connecting with my work. That and now, and I think this is a function of Instagram, because it's always like you're comparing, like when you're seeing all these people putting out amazing work, it's like, God, I'm not that, like, they're amazing. Like, I'm not that good. Like, versus when you was just, I knew, if I knew the art scene of the people on the Lower East Side and like into Williamsburg, like that was my scene of like maybe a couple hundred people, but that was like who I was comparing myself. And in that I had I knew that I was somebody. And then like now it's like I'm in the sea, and it really feels like I'm constantly like, God, I'm just not as good as these people. So it's funny that my confidence in my art, even though my experience has grown, I've grown, my art is better now, but by every objective measure. And yet somehow I feel less confident about it.
It's like it's the classic example, I feel like, of the double-edged sword, because I think overall, I think it has been more of a benefit, but it does make it tough because sometimes you go from having your little circle and it's like, okay, cool, I feel really confident, I feel good, and I feel happy about it. But then sometimes you'll see other pieces, and I do kind of think it is to an extent maybe human nature to, be competitive and to be sort of judging it. But I'd say overall, I do think it has been more beneficial than not, because at the very least, it gives that platform that didn't used to exist. Now, it's not perfect, but at the very least, I think it gives more freedom and certainly a lot more control, even as well. Now you don't have to feel the not competition, but the struggle of maybe, oh, I have maybe only 2 or 3 outlets I can sell in, as opposed to, maybe 10 or 12 or whatever. And I think that's a function of it. And the other thing I've noticed too, that at least for me, I think the best advantage of it has been seeing different people's creative processes and seeing, oh, you've been using this medium that I never used to think about.
Yeah.
I was up in New York, and my friend had with some chalk markers, with some paint markers. We had some acrylic markers, and I was the type of person, I said, I don't want to do that. Like I was like, I don't know. I'm like, I've never used this before. Let me see. And I tested them out, and it was really pretty good, and I was impressed. I was like, wow, this is something I didn't think about. And that's
Yeah.
the benefit of having different friends and different being introduced to kind of different styles. And I noticed that it's almost kind of the same thing with you being multimedia. It's you kind of you kind of have your feet dipping in different ponds, if you will.
Yeah, and I really thrive off of that kind of cross fertilization. I mean, I get really excited when I learn about what somebody else is doing, and like it's a medium I've never worked with before, or I've dabbled in it, but then I'm like, whoa, that is cool. Like I've got uh, another artist friend, Erin Kay. She does like these incredible interactive, like site-based virtual art pieces, so that like you have to experience them through your phone or through a digital thing, kind of like the Pokemon thing, and it
Pokemon
just
Go.
gets me. Yeah, like yeah, but instead it's art. So like art will be like some snakes will be coming out of a building or something like that. I guess that's Pokemon Go. I don't know. Those what those Pokemons are in the real world.
Yeah, it's they had that, and they've got something in Raleigh. We have something that's called it's called Artsplosion, and it's the same thing. I wish I had a picture of it on me right now, but it's the same thing. It does these kind of like 3D like images, and then it's got these different rooms that have the circles are illuminating, and then you see
Yeah,
different,
yeah.
like pieces projected. It's really quite cool.
Yeah, no, it totally blows my mind. And then that just gets me like thinking about like, oh, I could, do this. And then like I got this concept about like how people might assign their different aspects of their identity, like different colors. And then if you like blended them together, they would produce another color and that would be them. And like, so then I started thinking that that would be a cool art piece too. And so like, anyway, my point is that all these things, all this exposure to other people, um, I find very stimulating artistically. So,
Do you,
yeah.
do you think that that's been one of the greatest opportunities you've had, is being in a place where you can be around so many different kind of artistic perspectives, and you're trying to perfect your piece, but then you've got somebody else that's almost, rather it's a friend, rather it's maybe an acquaintance, being able to help you out and also help with inspiration. Has that been something that's been a benefit for you, think, or how would you describe that?
Yeah, for me, definitely. I do much better, and I find myself much more productive when I'm surrounded by people that are doing interesting things. So I've definitely learned that um, I need that. If I don't, um, then I get distracted and I work on other things. I just kind of end up um, like withering a little bit. So um, that's definitely something I seek out.
I agree. I think it's been it's really been kind of a nice thing too. Even I thought I was going to cover this more, about COVID, but thankfully it's been kind of a respite to not have to talk about it. But that's been one of the kind of the benefits of, at least here in North Carolina, leaving COVID, is we've had more people starting to go out, and people are being kind of able to get connected again. Like I just
Mm-hmm.
worked on a couple collab pieces. One of my friend, he actually, ironically enough, does a lot of digital art, and we did kind of an interesting thing where he did his piece. He left certain pieces out, like kind of like blank, almost like with almost like if you have like a coloring book or something, and you take a
Mm-hmm.
poster. So he left pieces blank, and then he printed it out, and then I took the paint, and then I just went and kind of painted it in and did my thing. And that's been one of the biggest benefits I've noticed, is
Very cool.
more people are more people I've noticed are like receptive to collaborating again, and that felt really quite nice.
Definitely. Yeah, I think you know, I mean, just like any other big event in our history, wars or the Depression, I think that this is probably going to reset some, patterns of behavior and you know, other other social norms and things, and hopefully all for the better and for the healthier. I mean, that you know,
That's the hope. Now,
yeah.
one last thing I'd been kind of wondering is, as somebody that's been, active since, the 90s and has more experience than others, is there any piece of advice that you would give to somebody that's maybe just starting out, or maybe they've moved from, say, a smaller city to New York, and they're trying to figure out, some advice, or just trying to figure out what they could do to improve? Do you have any observations or any advice that you'd want to impart on any young creators at the moment?
Um, well, I don't know that I'm, like I feel like I'm still a work in progress myself, so I don't know like if my advice is worth anything. But I think, the things that I have found helpful for me is, and this was a piece of advice I got from somebody when I was in like a really rough patch, was just to work. Just you have to work. You have to just keep doing the work. You cannot get better at your art unless you just do it and do a lot of it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so and you have to double down when it's hard, like when you fail or when you're feeling crappy or when you're in a funk. That's the time, or when you get evicted from your house, as I did when like he had given me this piece of advice. He's like, you know, it's like, what am I going to do? He's like, you just have to work hard. You just have to work, just work. And so I think I've always hung on to that advice. I think it's really important advice.